Right. This time we are focusing on climate change and how it impacts human livelihoods. The water we drink, air we breathe, our ability to travel, our ability to have safe housing, all of that combined together into human livelihoods, and how with adaptations or without adaptations, what the future might look like. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen. And here we go. So looking at human health, the impacts and adaptation and co-benefits of our livelihoods. So some key takeaways of the recent IPCC reports is that at least up until mid-century, so like 2050 or so, climate change will mainly act by exacerbating current health problems. So we don't think that new health problems that have never happened before are going to arise. Instead, the health problems that we already have, right? The asthma, the malnutrition, things like that, it's just going to be exacerbated. In recent decades, climate change has contributed to levels of ill health through the present worldwide burden of climate change, or though the present worldwide burden of climate change and ill health is relatively small when compared to other stressors on health and is not very well qualified. So a lot of what we're going to talk about this time, um, there's going to be fewer numbers here, right? This is hard to quantify, but we do know that uh, climate change can cause more heat-related death and illnesses, more waterborne illnesses and disease vectors like malaria through mosquitoes, and it can reduce food production for some vulnerable populations. Right. Now, I said there's going to be less quantifiable data here, but doesn't mean there's going to be none. So again, this is from the IPCC report, and these graphs are showing in yellow the amount of risk for each of these variables we could have if we increase our adaptation versus red, what's going to happen if we just keep going on with what we're doing with the current adaptation measures. And notice looking at these images, we can indeed reduce risk. So the present is that top figure right there, and we can see moving just a little bit into the future, just a couple decades, 2030 to 2040, we can keep a lot of the risk the same as it is today if we increase our adaptation measures, right? But it is possible we can do it. We know how to do it. If we can continue on to 2080 to 2100, assuming a 4 degrees increase in Celsius or 4 degrees Celsius increase in temperature, again, we can keep some of the risks as low as they are today. That's vector-borne illnesses, air quality. We can keep those fairly low. Other ones might increase a little bit, malnutrition, heat, food and waterborne infections, but they will be much, much more limited. Notice the yellow is still much, much smaller than the red if we introduce high adaptation measures. Particularly, we need to do this amongst the poorest and least healthy groups because they're going to be the ones that are most impacted by these changes. Right? So the most effective measures to reduce the vulnerability in the near term are programs that implement and improve basic public health measures. So you might ask yourself, we're talking about climate change. So why are we also talking about housing? Or sanitation, things like that. Well, it's because climate change just exacerbates the current problems we already have. So we need to focus on the current problems. We need to focus on clean water and sanitation. We need to focus on healthcare and vaccination and child health care services. We need to focus on disaster preparedness and response and also alleviate poverty. Because again, places that already have these problems are going to be exacerbated by climate change. All right, so how can we apply this knowledge? The topic of human health can be a really strong motivator for individual action. That means if you're talking to somebody who, one, either isn't worried about climate change, or two, is worried about it, but just doesn't have the time or effort or passion to actually do anything about it in their everyday lives, this can be a motivator if you talk about their individual livelihoods, their individual health and well-being. And that's what we're going to talk about in class this week.